Earth is on the brink. Earth is issuing a distressing call. The United Nations Weather Agency, World Meteorological Organization, has sounded a red alert. The UN agency has warned that there is a high probability that 2024 will be another record hot year. Not just this, the UN agency has also sounded alarm bells over the world breaching the global heating limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius, even if only temporarily. And the UN agency also confirmed what was suspected, that 2023 is the hottest year on record, with unprecedented ocean warmth, glacier retreat, and Antarctic sea ice loss being witnessed through the year. Not just 2023. In fact, the last 10 years were the warmest 10-year period on record, as per the UN agency. Now, WMO also issued concerns over efforts being made to reverse the trend, saying that fossil fuel pollution is sending climate chaos off the charts. But to better understand this, I'm being joined in by my guest this afternoon, Harjeet Singh, climate activist. Harjeet, thank you very much for taking the time out, joining us here on Mirror Now. Great to see you once again on the show. As far as the red alert is concerned, the key findings, these are pretty alarming. Essentially, for someone who is a climate activist, and this is something that we probably saw on the cards because so much of global warming is a word that, we've had in our conversations, and probably that particular conversation has now born into reality, which is actually sad to see.
Thank you, Nivedna, for having me. And this is a very important conversation. And as you mentioned, how the WMO report really issues a very stark warning, telling us how 2023 was the warmest year ever, and how 2024 is going to see a lot more warming. What does that mean? It means that we are going to see many more disasters, erratic weather pattern. And we have already witnessed unprecedented heat waves, floods, drought, cyclones. At the same time, we are seeing sea levels are rising, glaciers are melting, oceans are turning acidic. It has a huge impact on the society as well as economy. Many of the development gains that we had are being eroded, are being reversed. Now, in that situation, many people are also being forced to leave their homes. Either their houses are being destroyed or they don't have sufficient means to earn their livelihood. So we are already seeing those impacts, and with temperatures rising, we will see many more people getting affected. And this is a real concern that we are facing at this moment.
Absolutely, Harjeet. And as you pointed out, there are, of course, several factors that are, attributing to what we've seen last year as well. Would you say El Nino also did play a major role in what we did see?
Yes, this year El Nino did play a role. So about 2 degrees of temperature rise is because of El Nino phenomenon. And so the natural phenomenon of El Nino coinciding with already warming planet. So we were living in a world of 1.2 degree warming compared to pre-industrial era. Now another 2 degree and more has been added because of El Nino. And that makes us far more vulnerable to these climate impacts. And we need to understand the cause of this crisis, which is burning fossil fuels that you also mentioned, WMO highlighting. So we need to be moving away from fossil fuels, which means coal, oil, and gas. And that's why we talk about a renewable energy powered world. That is the only hope we have to deal with the situation now and make sure that the crisis doesn't become far more worse in the years and decades to come.
And as we talk about how this shouldn't become far more worse, and one shouldn't, of course, we're anticipating this would happen, but all of us have a role to play in this, Harjeet. What is a bit that every citizen should do, can do? Of course, we've spoken about this in the past as well, but seems like, considering the report is talking about how, in terms of investment as well, let's say annual investments in climate must grow sixfold. That is probably from the government's end of perspective, but both the angles, how do we do our bit?
Nivedna, you are absolutely right. When we have to talk about dealing with climate change, we need to look at the actions to be taken by the government, which means setting the right policy framework, making sure that the resources are available, and then citizens have a role to play to assess what kind of lifestyle we are living, how we can reduce our carbon footprint by using less water, the kind of food we eat. We should be eating more local food, organic food that has a much lesser carbon footprint. What kind of transport do we use? How much electricity do we consume? So all aspects of our lives determine the kind of carbon footprint we have. But I must also mention that that is enabled by the government policies and the infrastructure. If we have a safe bicycle lane, it will encourage citizens to use bicycle a lot more. Similarly, if we have renewable energy options available, which government is trying to make it much more easily accessible and with incentives to citizens, they are adopting it. But we have to go a long way to make sure that we change our lifestyles and governments do support those measures, because what we are seeing at this moment is a real dire situation. And if we don't change the course right now, we will be seeing a lot more disasters affecting us and the economy.
Absolutely, Harjit. And like you pointed out, essentially it's hand in hand in terms of a symbiosis relation between the policy and what citizens have to do. But here's what I want to understand from your perspective. Let's talk about a country like India. You've, of course, said that lifestyle changes need to be made. But given the population as well, are we seeing challenges on that front?
Well, absolutely. When we see resources are not growing, when we talk about water, land, forest, they are limited. And as population grows, the pressure on these natural resources increase. So for a country like India, it is going to become a lot more harder to continue to use these resources at the same pace. In fact, we need to be moving away from the kind of development model that West has promoted. So rich countries who are actually responsible for the climate crisis that we are facing. So when we talk about more than 1 degree of temperature rise, the first 1 degree Celsius of warming has been contributed by historical emissions. So we have to have a lot more sustainable lifestyle, which government is talking about, but now we also have to implement that so that we are not in the same trap of living a life which is high carbon intensive and causing a lot more problem and aggravating the crisis.
Right, Harjit. I want to thank you for joining us on the show, not only sharing with us your perspective as to what you make of this report, but more importantly, what every one of us can do to ensure this doesn't get worse than it already is. Thank you very much. We're going to leave it at that.